I have seen minds that bend, minds that tremble, minds that live their whole existence chasing approval like thirsty wanderers, chasing mirages in the desert. And I have seen something else. Something rare, unsettling, unforgettable. A mind that does not chase, does not tremble, does not bend. A mind that simply is. The first time I encountered such a mind, I didn't recognize it immediately. I only felt the silence. The air thickened. People who moments before had been laughing, arguing, shouting over one another, suddenly slowed their words. Jokes dissolved. Conversations broke off mid-sentence. It was as if chaos itself lost its balance. At first, I thought it was coincidence, but I soon realized it was presence. Not loud, not dramatic, not demanding, but so still, so anchored, that everything unstable around it began to collapse. That presence was not interested in proving anything. It didn't need to raise its voice or display credentials or decorate itself with recognition. It did not try to convince. And yet, without effort, it held the room. I found myself leaning in, not because it asked for my attention, but because my restless mind had no choice but to surrender to its gravity. And then the realization struck me with a force I could not shake. This is not the mind of the majority. Most minds are restless fires, burning bright and fast, flickering in the wind, always needing more oxygen, always hungry, always consuming themselves. But this mind was stone, immovable, untouchable. There was no flame to blow out because there was no chase. I began to wonder, what makes such a mind? Is it gifted from birth, some accident of fate, some genetic fortune? Or is it forged like iron beaten in fire, hammered until it no longer breaks? The more I watched, the more I saw, this mind was not seeking praise. Praise slid off like water on glass. It was not threatened by power because power had no leverage. It was not even seduced by love because love had no hook if it came with chains. This mind was anchored not in external storms, but in an ocean beneath them all. And the truth unsettled me, because I realized how fragile most of us are. We are addicted to the nods, the claps, the smiles, the reassuring looks. We are enslaved by criticism, so easily bent by rejection, so desperate to be chosen. And here was a mind that could not be moved, not even by the temptations that bend the strongest among us. The longer I reflected, the more disturbing it became. If such stillness can exist, then what excuse do the rest of us have for our constant agitation? For our endless proving? We speak loudly, hoping our volume will make up for our lack of conviction. We chase endlessly, hoping the next achievement will silence the inner doubt. And yet, the silence never comes. Only exhaustion, only more hunger, only the gnawing suspicion that life is slipping by while we beg to be seen. But this other kind of mind, calm, clear, immovable, it lives differently. When it enters a room, it does not conquer with words or gestures. It conquers by refusing to be conquered. It does not need to push because it cannot be pulled. And deep down, every person feels it. Some admire it, some resent it, some fear it, but none can ignore it. I remember standing there, caught in its orbit, realizing that this was not just strength. It was freedom. True freedom. Freedom from the prison of reaction. Freedom from the chains of constant proving. Freedom from the exhausting theater of approval and rejection. And it made me ask myself, if I cannot learn to stand this still, if I cannot learn to anchor this deeply, then what am I but a leaf in the wind, carried by whatever current happens to blow my way? That thought haunted me, because I knew how easily I had been swayed my entire life. One compliment could lift me. One insult could shatter me. One rejection could send me spiraling. One opportunity could inflate me with illusions of meaning. I was a puppet, and invisible strings pulled me with every gesture of the crowd. And then I understood why such a mind was so rare. Not because it was impossible, but because almost no one dares to walk the path. It is easier to perform, easier to seek applause, easier to react than to hold still. Stillness takes courage. Stillness takes discipline. Stillness forces you to confront the terrifying possibility that your worth must come from within and nowhere else. That realization split something inside me. I knew I could no longer be content with noise. I could no longer live only to be understood by others while failing to understand myself. The world is filled with people begging to be heard, yet almost silent when asked to listen to their own soul. I didn't want to be one of them anymore. So I began to watch myself with brutal honesty. Every reaction, every rush of anger, every grasping for approval. I saw how quickly I sold my peace for scraps of validation, and I began to imagine what it would mean to stop, to walk into a room and not need to prove, not need to explain, not need to be noticed, to walk with clarity so deep that even misunderstanding could not touch me. That is the unshakable mind. And once you glimpse it, you cannot forget it, because it exposes everything you have been doing to avoid silence. It shows you how much of your life has been spent chasing instead of being. And it leaves you with only one question. Will you continue living scattered, or will you choose the ruthless discipline of clarity? If this vision stirs something in you, if a part of you longs for that stillness, then stay with me. Because in this journey, we will walk into the fire of self-mastery, into the ruthless clarity that most people fear, but every soul secretly craves. And if you want to support this path, if you want more of these reflections and reminders to anchor your mind, then subscribe to this channel. Your support gives me the strength to keep creating these messages, to keep building a space for those who are tired of noise and ready for depth. Now let me leave you with a question. Think carefully and comment your answer below. Which do you believe is more dangerous? A, a restless mind that constantly seeks approval. B, a silent mind that cannot be swayed by praise or criticism. Type your answer, A or B, in the comments. I want to see what you think. I used to believe that the real enemy in life was weakness, that people failed because they weren't strong enough, intelligent enough, or talented enough. But the longer I observed myself and others, the clearer it became that weakness wasn't the true problem. Scatteredness was. I saw how my own mind would leap from one desire to the next, chasing peace one day as if it would save me, then abandoning it for recognition the next, only to bury myself later in ambition that I secretly hoped would cover my shame. My mind was never still. It was always restless, always flickering, like a candle trapped in the wind. And no matter what I grasped, I always ended up with the same feeling, that I was being pulled apart in 100 directions, never steady, never whole. That realization hit me with force. I wasn't incapable, I was unclear. Most of us aren't failing because we lack ability. We're failing because we lack direction. Intelligence, I discovered, is common. It fills books, fuels arguments, impresses crowds. But clarity, that is rare. Clarity doesn't shout. It doesn't need to be recognized. It builds silently, brick by brick, into something unshakable. I could feel the difference when I was near it, the same way you feel the stillness of a mountain, even when you can't explain why it holds your attention. That kind of clarity is invisible to the eye, but undeniable to the soul. And yet, clarity never arrives as a gift. It isn't found in a quote taped to your wall or in a video that makes you feel good for 5 minutes. Clarity is forged in discomfort. It is born in the long hours when you finally stop distracting yourself and dare to face the questions you've been running from. I remember the night when those questions came for me, sharp and merciless. What do I actually want? Not what looks good to others, not what sounds noble or wins approval. What do I truly, painfully, honestly want when no one is watching? Who must I become to deserve it? Not in the eyes of the world, but in my own. And what am I willing to release to stop being torn apart by everything I keep clinging to? These questions did not flatter me. They did not soothe me. They cut me. They stripped away the illusions I had built to feel safe. They exposed the ways I had been lying to myself. And yet, the longer I sat with them, the more I realized that only through this kind of pain could clarity be born. That was the beginning of a ruthless mind. Not ruthless in cruelty, not ruthless against others, but ruthless against the lies, the noise, the endless distractions that had been stealing my life. It was ruthless discipline, ruthless subtraction, ruthless devotion to purpose. When I began to taste that clarity, something remarkable shifted. I stopped being tossed around by opinions, insults, and praise. I no longer cared who approved of me, who misunderstood me, who criticized me. Because once you know what you serve, the rest of the world loses its grip. Seneca's words came alive in me. If a man knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable. I understood then why I had been exhausted for so many years. It wasn't because I was failing. It was because I was sailing without a direction, carried endlessly by every gust of doubt, every gust of fear, every gust of attention. Clarity anchored me. For the first time, I began to say no, not out of bitterness, but out of alignment. I stopped explaining myself, not because I thought I was superior, but because I no longer needed to waste energy proving anything. If people misunderstood me, so be it. If they judged me, so be it. Their perception was no longer my prison. And that was when I began to hear something else. The voice of what Carl Jung called the unlived life. That hidden life inside me. The life I had suppressed to fit in. The life I had denied because it threatened the identity I had built for approval. It began to speak louder. It began to demand my attention. Listening to that voice was terrifying because it asked me to betray the script I had been following all my life. It asked me to give up illusions of success that made others clap but left me empty. But with clarity, I couldn't ignore it anymore. And when I finally surrendered, I discovered a sense of direction so strong that distractions became nothing more than static in the background. I realized then that clarity doesn't mean you never feel lost. It means even when you're lost, you still know which way is home. You may wander, but you will not forget. You may be misunderstood, but you will not misplace your values. And so my life became quieter, not in a dull way, but in a powerful way. Clarity is not just about knowing where you're going. It's about conserving yourself, your time, your energy, your very being. I stopped wasting hours trying to convince people to walk with me. I stopped begging to be seen. I started walking alone when I had to. And in that solitude, I became visible in a way I had never been before. Not visible to everyone, but visible to those who could sense the stillness, who could feel the difference between scattered noise and focused direction. Stillness itself became my secret weapon. But it was often misunderstood. People looked at me and thought I was cold, detached, indifferent. They couldn't see that stillness is not the absence of feeling, but the mastery of it. It is not weakness. It is the decision to choose when and how to respond. Emotional stillness is power with the volume turned down. I learned that I could feel everything, love, grief, joy, even anger, and yet be ruled by none of it. That was the difference between sensitivity as a compass and sensitivity as a cage. One guided me, the other imprisoned me. And so I began to live from that place. Not rushing, not reacting, not performing on cue, but moving deliberately, one decision at a time, towards something real. In a world obsessed with noise, I discovered that the quiet mind is the one thing that cannot be ignored. Because true power doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to prove. It simply cannot be shaken.